When I was sober, I realized that I was using partying, I was using alcohol, I was using all of these bad habits as a form of escape from the reality I was in. I grew up with this mistaken belief that success is defined by your job title.
Simon Alexander Ong is a personal development entrepreneur, coach, and the author of the best-selling book Energize, which explores the art and science of energy management to help individuals achieve their full potential.
We all have regrets because we always fall into this trap of thinking we're going to live forever. I know we only have one life, but we don't really appreciate it. Because I think if you really appreciated how short your life is, you would make very different decisions.
7 stages to life. First stage is infancy, childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, middle, late, and then end of life. But I always feel how we are shaped as humans is always in the first 3 stages of human life. You know, the first emotion that a child that gets born feels is pain. They feel pain initially because they release amniotic fluid from their body and they take their first ever breath. As children, especially between the ages of 0 to 2, if they do not have that emotional connection with the mom or the parent or lack that bonding, research shows they actually develop a dysregulated nervous system for life.
How to communicate better. If I wanted to become a better communicator, I had to put myself in a position where learning became the only option. And so for somebody who's unsure of their degree, unsure of their path in life, I would begin with the end in mind. What I mean by this is picture yourself as the 90-year-old version of you. We overwhelm ourselves. We say, well, I don't know what my purpose is. Well, if somebody could give me the solution or give me some money, then I could go ahead and make it happen.
Simon, welcome to the Be That Life podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to see you here and be with you and to spend time with you, especially because the moment that I met you first time in London, like you really exude the energy that I am just like, who is this guy? You know, the conversations that we're speaking about and the things that we were like, you know, strategizing, you're really incredible at what you do. And I believe that's the reason why you're so successful at what you do.
Thank you.
And now as a life coach, and, you know, helping so many people globally, doing so many incredible things. It's always fascinating to understand people's journey and their story and why they even got to the place that they are today, right? So what was that pivotal moment for you as to why you decided to shift from where you were to where you are today?
There were a couple of pivotal moments, but I think the one that stands out to me was when I was working in the corporate world. And I remember it was one Christmas and there was some client entertainment. And before I went into this nightclub was underground, so I knew there wasn't going to be any reception for my phone. Before I went down there, I texted my girlfriend at the time and I said to her, I'm going to this event tonight. I'm going to be late. I'm probably going to take the last train back. So I'll be home around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I go down, I check my bag in, and the party starts. The drink starts flowing, the entertainment kicks off. It's very extravagant. Before I know it, you know, there's a lot of alcohol in my system, and I somehow stumble outside of this club. I check my phone as I get into a taxi, and I see plenty of missed calls from my girlfriend, voice messages. She, of course, was worried. This was middle of the morning now, and she couldn't get hold of me. I remember as I went back to our home that we were renting, I just collapsed in the bath. And through my blurred vision, I could see her next to me just crying. You know, she didn't know where I was and what I was up to. And I think that was the pivotal moment for me. When I was sober, I realized that I was using partying, I was using alcohol, I was using all of these bad habits as a form of escape from the reality I was in. And at that moment, I decided if I didn't change where I was, I would stand to lose more than my job and my relationship. And that was a big wake-up call for me. And so from that point, I decided to focus on my physical health, and then that became a great foundation to then focus on all the other areas to begin building a life that I enjoyed and one that I found fulfilling.
What was it about the job that you had at that time that you did not find fulfilling?
So I grew up with this mistaken belief that success is defined by your job title. And so from my family and my peer group, I always had this understanding that when I graduated from college, if I became a banker, a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, I would be successful. And so I would hold on to these identities. But then when I started in the financial services sector, it was the worst possible time. This was a year before the financial crisis swept across the planet. And the first company I worked with was Lehman Brothers, which collapsed 14 months after I joined. And so the reality was very different to my expectations. It was harsh in terms of the hours. It was very hard work. And because it wasn't something I enjoyed, I felt lost. I didn't know what else I wanted to do. And that's why for me it wasn't fulfilling. It looked successful on paper. People would look at what I was up to. Simon, you're a banker, you're working in a very prestigious company. You must be very successful. But I quickly realized that success and fulfillment were very different things. Inside, I wasn't fulfilled. I would escape to the toilet cubicle, shut myself in, and just dream of a different life. And so I knew something had to change. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd never really sat down and reflected and gone inward to understand what my life was meant for.
How old were you?
This would have been in my early 20s.
Your early
20s
That's when
this
you
happened.
just really discovered that role, that job, that environment wasn't for you anymore.
The pain of continuing as things were was outweighing the pain of change.
What was your childhood like?
Childhood was challenging. I was born here in the UK, but I come from a Chinese background. And so the pressure was very much on performing well in everything I did, especially academics.
Why are the Chinese this way? What is it about the Chinese culture? Not just the Chinese, the Singaporeans, a lot of Asian families and their culture is that the kids have to be living the parents' dream.
I would probably broaden that out and say not just Asian culture, but
globally.
it also applies a lot to immigrant culture. People who
Immigrant.
have moved to a different country for want of a better life,
Right.
have this pressure for their children to live a life maybe they couldn't, or to
Right.
experience success maybe they haven't. And I think there's two parts to it. On the one side, it's the hard work. They want their children to work hard, which is a good thing. It instills a great skill. To move ahead in life, you have to work hard. But for me, the other part is pride. And that's where the issue comes in. Is I want to be able to show off that my son or my daughter is top of the class or is achieving all of these amazing things. And that can create unnecessary pressure on the child because then they feel limited. They're not given the space to pursue what makes them happy, what brings them joy. And as I became wiser, when I began to pursue my own dreams and goals, what I realized is that so many of us, at whatever age you're at, are exhausted, not because you are physically doing too much, but because you're doing too little of the things that bring you joy and you're running someone else's race. And that's why I was unfulfilled. I was running somebody else's race. And it was time to understand what success meant for me, what fulfillment meant for me, and start chasing that.
What's your relationship like with your parents?
It was difficult. My mum was the emotional glue of the family. She was the one that had emotional intelligence, and I say she was because she passed when I was 17.
I'm sorry.
In an unfortunate accident. But when she was alive, she was the emotional glue of the family. She would care about my brother and I's feelings and our hopes and desires in life. Whereas I think for my father, it was very much of a strict disciplinarian relationship. It was very much focused on results. So to give you an example, I might come home one day and I might say to my parents, "Oh, I tried this new activity at school." My mum would say, "Tell me about it. How did you get on? What did you learn?" She was more focused on the emotional element. Whereas my dad would probably say something like, "So what was the result? How did you
Right.
perform?" It was very much focused on the end product. And so it was probably a more difficult relationship with my father. And it was especially tough when we lost our mum,
Right.
because then the dynamics completely shifted.
Right.
And yeah, that's why it took a while for me to come out of my shell, because I wasn't always comfortable sharing what was going on in my head. I think especially as men, it's a lot harder to share our emotions and our feelings than it is when you have a female in the family that can encourage you to open up. So that was very challenging for me growing up.
How's your relationship with your dad now?
I think the relationship with my dad now is a lot better than it was. I guess two reasons. One is people tend to mellow as they get older, so
Right.
that's been a big help on that side. Second is I think he's begun to understand my own wants. When I quit the corporate world and moved into entrepreneurship, he just couldn't understand it. Um, it was, we just invested all of this money into your education. You spent 4 years at university. You've accumulated this wealth from your job. You've got security of a company giving you stable income. But why would you give all of that up? And it's always difficult for people to understand on the outside because they're never you. And then once he started seeing what I was up to when I began to share on social media, my interview on news channels, the book I was about to publish, he began to realize that this was what I was meant for. And I think once he saw again the results, he quickly began to understand actually he's happy, and I think he's doing what he's meant to do. So that certainly helped the relationship as we both got older.
The reason I asked those questions is actually, I went through a very kind of like emotional roller coaster kind of upbringing too, and trying to understand it from a person that's made it in life and has become really successful, opposed to other people who become like a victim of their circumstance and decide they don't want to do anything with their life based on their past. It's really valuable for people to hear it, the human side and the upbringing, because it shows that there's hope for everyone.
Yeah. I think it also, just as we're talking about this, I was, and again, maybe this comes from my mum, but I was also very emotionally intelligent enough to understand that we as humans were all just trying to do good things. It may come out misunderstood when we do it, but we all have a frame of reference, and that frame of reference will be very different. So I understood that my dad always meant well, but because when he grew up, and he grew up in a very poor family, it was very, there's a lot of poverty when he grew up in Malaysia. I mean, I was born here, very different to being born in Malaysia at the time that he was. And this was before the internet, before we had lots of different peer groups and communities. And so his only point of reference was his parents. And his parents at the time were very strict. And so that's all he knew. That's the frame of reference he had growing up as to how to be a parent. Whereas when I grew up, I had my own parents, but I also had social media. I had books to read. I had other people ahead of me who were doing well as parents. So I could always ask them for advice. What advice could you give me to be a better parent? I'm going to be a father of a daughter. What do I need to know in order to be a good father? And so I had lots of different points of reference, whereas my father and my mother, they had very narrow points of references. And so when I understood that, it was a lot easier to forgive my parents for the way they brought me up and what happened in the family.
Did you have any regrets during the time that you were growing up, like things you wish you could have told your mom?
Absolutely. I think we all have regrets because we always fall into this trap of thinking we're going to live forever. And when we think that way, we fall into this tragic scenario of living as if we're never going to die and then dying having never really lived. And so when my mum's passing happened, which again was unexpected, it wasn't like we knew this was going to happen. First feeling I felt was regret. It's regret of not saying I loved you enough, of not being there enough for her. But at the same time, even though I had those regrets at the time, I also think that a lot of the stuff that happened when I was younger, those events have helped me to be who I am today.
Right.
Her death made me understand. I mean, when I say understand, I mean truly understand how short life is. A lot of us will say, I know we only have one life, but we don't really appreciate it. Because I think if you really appreciated how short your life is, you would make very different decisions. And when you lose someone that close to you, it really hits home. And you end up collapsing that gap between idea and execution. And you realize that, you have to live with some urgency. Because if you're lucky, you get to live for 4,000 weeks on this planet. Not very long.
Right. There are 7 stages to life, 7 stages to our lives until we end our lives. First stage is infancy, childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, middle, late, and then end of life. But I always feel how we are shaped as humans is always in the first 3 stages of human life. The first emotion that a child that gets born feels is pain. They feel pain initially because they release amniotic fluid from their body and they take their first ever breath. That's actually not easy to do for someone that's been in the womb for 9 months. And as children, especially between the ages of 0 to 2, if they do not have that emotional connection with the mom or the parent or lack that bonding, research shows they actually develop a dysregulated nervous system for life. Not many people really understand that. By the time they hit childhood, between 3 years old to about 12, they are more in the space of they really want attention. If you're not getting that emotional bond from parents or from your family, they resort to substance abuse, social media, external validation, because they need to balance their energy somehow. In the next stage of life, which is very vital from 13 to 19, this is the part where, a lot of kids want to feel they're seen, heard, and respected. And then a lot of the times, parents, like our parents and our parents' generation, they only know one way of parenting. They don't know any other way. And for them, they feel that their way or it's the highway. And I grew up in that same environment as you. And I feel a lot of the same pains and struggles and challenges that you felt. And, that age between the 13 to 19, it's so vital because that will define the kind of way that they're going to move into adult life. I believe that this part is like extremely important before we even talk about, mastering energy and how to get better at energy and the tools that we need for success, because we need to take people a step back into really understanding where does energy come from? How are we showing up every single day? It's not just based on what we experience at that moment. It goes back decades.
It's
From
our
all
stories.
the things that we experienced when we were younger, things that we even block out, we don't want to remember because they were so painful. Rejection, heartbreak, abuse, being bullied. You become an introvert, you become shy. You mentioned this in your book, right? And all of those things come from trauma and experiences that you don't know how to, as a boy especially, you're not able to emotionally regulate. You can't speak about your problems. You're living with a father who only cares about discipline, does not focus on emotional regulation. We turn out to become people that not able to reach our full potential. So for someone in their 20s who has experienced a lot of the things that we have experienced and are still in a position where they don't have an amazing relationship with their parents because they don't know how to talk to them. They are currently in university trying to map out their life. They're in a subject or an education system that they don't want to be, or a degree that they don't necessarily feel that they want to have, but are pushed because they want to please their parents. They don't know what else to do in their lives. They don't want to seem like they are worthless or have very low self-worth. What would you recommend to someone in that stage in their life?
Well, first of all, I can absolutely relate to everything you shared there. And what I would suggest first is the fact that you cannot change somebody who does not want to change. Now, this applies to whether they're your parents, your friends, your colleagues, anybody you spend time with. All we can do is focus on the things that we can control. Now, I understand the pressures of being a young adult, because when you go to college, especially if your parents have funded that for you and have paid for the education, it's very difficult to say, hey, actually, I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. you're living in the same house, they're paying for a lot of your expenses. And so what I had to do is to still focus on pursuing the education. But what I did is on the side of that, explore my own dreams, explore the things I wanted to do.
But you were shy and you were introverted.
I was shy and introverted, and the passing of my mum made me even more shy and introverted because I just didn't know how to share what I was going through with other people. And I think the moment where I worked on that a lot was when I realized I didn't want to stay in this industry. And I still worked for nearly 10 years. I worked for nearly 10 years in the financial services sector. But I quickly realized as I read books, as I went to events, as I learned from people ahead of me, that unless I could speak to people, unless I could build relationships, speak on a stage, then nobody will know who I am. And if I am the product, I have to learn how to communicate better. And so that's where I had to put myself in a position where learning became the only option. If I wanted to become a better communicator, I had to put myself in a position where I didn't know anybody and I had to introduce myself. I had to start a conversation, and it wasn't easy at first. But I came to understand that nothing beats fear like practice. The more you practice something, the more comfortable you get at doing it. And so for somebody who's unsure of their degree, unsure of their path in life, I would begin with the end in mind. What I mean by this is picture yourself as the 90-year-old version of you. How will you know that you've lived a fulfilling life? And this is a very subjective experience because a fulfilling life will mean different things for different people. But you've got to start somewhere. And it may be a little vague at the beginning if you've never done this before. You might have some very vague idea, but that's all you need to start. And then you fast forward back to today, and then you say, well, what is one small thing I can do to make progress towards that vision, to make that thing a reality? It doesn't have to be big, and this is what stops a lot of us taking action. We overwhelm ourselves. We say, well, I don't know what my purpose is. Well, if somebody could give me the solution or give me some money, then I could go ahead and make it happen.
That's the $1 million question, isn't it?
It's the $1 million question. Is I'm waiting to know that, and then I can start making progress on that journey. The fact is, you never begin with working out what your purpose is, because for some people that might happen straight away. For others, it might take months, even years. Some people in their old age still don't know what their purpose is.
Right.
You start with a softer question, and you just say, okay, what are the things I'm most curious about right now? Right now, what do I find myself interested in that I would spend hours learning or reading about? And then you just explore those clues. And then you go, okay, now I've exposed myself to that. What's next? You just explore all of these different interests because you have no idea how these things will connect over time. It's the same reason why Steve Jobs went to pursue a calligraphy class. Now, that was something he was curious about. It had nothing to do with what he did eventually, but that interest in calligraphy led to his design thinking abilities when he then went to start Apple. So you never know how these things begin to connect over time. I always say the universe sends you moments of inspiration for a reason. You don't know what they are in the moment, but in hindsight, you will when you look back over time. So I would begin with the end in mind and then say to yourself, what am I most curious about today? Take a small step forward from there and then see what happens next, because clarity comes from action. You're never given the map ahead of time, but as you step forward, the rest of the map will begin to reveal itself to you.
What was your friendship circle like at that time?
When I quit my career
when you were still in uni?
When I was still in university, I had a very small friendship circle. It only started expanding once I realized that I didn't want to do my job in finance anymore. I always had a very small circle of friends. Again, because I was introverted. I was quite a shy person.
So you weren't really asking and seeking for advice from your friends because you didn't really have that many friends, right?
Yeah, I didn't have that many friends at the time.
So who was your mentor at the time?
So when I was at university, I didn't really have any mentors.
So it was really just you and your own motivation to want to have a different life.
It was just me. And at that time when I was in university, I wanted to get a job in finance. So the only motivation was seeing graduates landing jobs in these prestigious investment banks.
So for you, that was really what you wanted at that time?
That was all I knew was what success was.
Right.
And so once I landed the job in a bank, I was ecstatic. I was happy because I got what I wanted. But I realized in hindsight, I got what other people wanted, what I thought I needed to feel successful. And after the first few years in finance, obviously, I went through being in and out of jobs. Lehman Brothers collapsed. I went to my next job.
Right.
I was only there for a couple of years. My mentors then became the books I read, because I knew I had to change my environment if I wanted to change my direction in life. And so the first place that started was with what I was reading. I would completely change things I read, whether it was the books I was reading, the shows I was watching, things I was listening to literally condition my mind to explore ways I'd never thought about before. So those were my initial mentors. And then the next step was, once I knew there were people out in the world who I could learn from, that I could soak their wisdom, I would then create what I share in my book, Energize, this mental board of advisors, otherwise known as an MBA. And a mental board of advisors is simply when you're going for a challenge or when you have a difficult choice to make, you close your eyes, you go into your imagination, you visualize yourself walking into this boardroom. You pull out your seat. On your right are 3 individuals. On your left are 3 further individuals. And these are individuals you've picked, dead or alive, that inspire you in some way. And then you put out your question or your challenge to this group of people. And you look at each one of them and just give them a chance to speak to what you shared. And you hear what they say. And suddenly those became my new group of mentors. Before eventually, when I did break out of the corporate world and became an entrepreneur, now I had real life mentors. So that kind of took it up a level.
So this was like in your early 20s when you decided to leave the finance world. And was your next step was like, I want to be a life coach?
Not at all. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to be.
You were just like, I'm going to take some time off. I need to figure out what I want to do.
Yeah. I embarked on the longest journey we humans make, which are the inches from our heads to our hearts. Never an easy journey, but the most fulfilling that you will ever embark on.
Okay, elaborate on this.
So what I mean by this is that I had always sought external validation in deciding what success meant for me. But once I started changing what I read, once I started changing the mentors I was drawing inspiration from, I realized that the job of success started with me. I had to go inward. And that meant really understanding myself. As I often share with my clients, you can't have self-development without self-awareness. I had to become more aware of who I was, what my strengths were, and what I could contribute to the world.
Did you do some healing techniques?
Yeah,
Did you go to some retreats? What were you experiencing at this time?
Yeah, so I just practiced a lot of what I was learning on myself. So I had to learn to forgive myself. I had to learn to forgive those who had hurt me in the past. I had to find peace with what had happened. And I think once I worked on that part of myself, I was then able to live more in the present, to focus my energy on what was important rather than the things that just didn't matter. And so for me, it was a case of exploring my interests. I tried different businesses. They didn't work out, but that eventually led me to coaching.
Right.
Because deep down, I knew I wanted to help people. I just didn't know what that medium would be. But I knew in some capacity, I wanted to add value into the world through helping them, whether it was coaching, speaking, or now writing. But it was a journey to get there.
You say that it's super fulfilling to help people.
Yeah.
And I think that is what we are in this universe for. We're in this world for this very reason, right? And I think people just need and want to help. We're designed to help. It's innate. It's something that I believe we want to do. We're not born to hate. We're born to love.
And this is what children show us. I learned so much from my daughter.
Exactly.
And she shows me exactly that. We're born to love. We're born to care. We're born to be kind. You only get taught to hate as you grow older. Yeah. And this is why I love being a parent. Because I'm a coach and I love helping people, a lot of those qualities carry over to being a parent. And just having that relationship with her, seeing her grow, seeing her develop, it's the greatest gift as a parent.
Totally. And I'm a parent too, and my son's 21 years old. So I went through a lot of this same journey, but it is because of him that I learned what unconditional love was. Because I didn't really get that same kind of love from my family and my parents. So as parents, what we experience with our children just is a direct reflection on us as people, right? So I feel like every single person in the world, regardless of people who still don't understand what their purpose is, and those that have already found it, they find it the most fulfilling when it's about giving and helping. And regardless of what industry we're in, we're all service based.
Absolutely.
We're all serving. We're all serving somehow in any way, in shape, or form. We're in the service business.
Yeah.
Right? And so fast forward to you already building your business and you developing, this coaching platform and having clients working with some top thinkers in the world. Where do you think people in their 30s who have pretty much moved away from working the 9-to-5 job, wanted to find entrepreneurship, failed so many times, reached a point in their business where they're like, I want to give up and I am ready to go back into the corporate world. By the way, I've seen this many times happen because I can't handle entrepreneurship. It's really hard. We all know how many percentage of businesses fail, right? As an entrepreneur, because really it's very difficult for people to have that same sort of mental resilience to be able to hack entrepreneurship.
And this is something important to understand. A job title is different from entrepreneurship. So if you might introduce yourself as I'm a banker, I'm a chef, I'm a manager, I'm a musician, I'm a director. These are job titles. But when you say you're an entrepreneur is not a job title, because entrepreneurship is a lifestyle. And as you say, it's very difficult for many people to adjust to that, because when you work in a job, you can switch off. When work finishes and you come home, or you go on holiday, or the weekend arrives, you can switch off. Whereas when you run a business, when you are the entrepreneur, when you are following the path of entrepreneurship, it is a 24/7 lifestyle. Even if you're not doing something, you're thinking about something related to your work. And so this is why it's difficult. It also is not for the faint-hearted, because you are challenged to step out of your comfort zone every single day. You have to deal with challenges. You will face failure. You will have setbacks. And that isn't for everyone, because it really tests your resilience.
So how are entrepreneurs meant to master their energy at a phase where they don't know if they can make it?
The way we manage our energy, especially when you go through difficult periods, is community. Community is how you find the power to overcome life's challenges. And this is why when I left the corporate world and went to entrepreneurship, one of the experiences I went through, and I'm sure many people have gone through this, is loneliness.
Yeah,
I went through a lot of loneliness because I'm moving from one industry to a completely different industry. And also not many people in my circles knew what I was doing.
Right.
They had never run a successful business, and there wasn't many people for me to relate to. So for a while, I went through this phase of loneliness where I just didn't know who I could share my challenges with, who I could share my struggles with. But as I found groups of people that I could share this with, fellow entrepreneurs, fellow individuals that wanted to make a mark in the world, I found my salvation. I could share these struggles with them. And I quickly realized, which is important, is that I was not the only one.
Right.
And I think that was a big breakthrough. I always felt, I wonder if anyone else is going through this. And then when I realized that there were many people, many peers also sharing the same struggles and challenges, then it was a powerful way that we could work through this together.
I went through that exact same motion like every single entrepreneur. And I think we also gravitate towards different set of friends. We're no longer having the same type of friendship circles. We outgrow them because they're either not entrepreneurs, they don't understand you, or they also reach a level of insecurity themselves. And you can't relate to them because they have the 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
And the way that they speak to you, it's more like out of jealousy and spite, opposed to cheering you on.
Yeah.
So I kind of lost a lot of friends when I started reaching a level of success, and developed other friends who were in the same level and understood my success and, wanted to only cheer me on and help me grow. So do you think that we can still retain friends regardless, or do you think our friendship circles must change in order to grow?
You can keep some friends, and there are what I would call your core friends. People that will support you and champion you and cheer you on, even if they don't understand what you're doing, because they like you for you. Now, these might be family members, these might be friends you've grown up with, who know your background, who know your story. So you can keep some core friends. However, the reality is your friendship circle generally will and must change, because not everyone will evolve the same way you do. And if you keep too many people from your past, you won't have space to fit people in who inspire you about what your future could be like. And there's an energy impact of that. If you're spending time with people who just drain you of energy, who make you feel like, it's a waste of my time, and they're not really helping me, they're actually just questioning my decisions all the time, then that's going to impact your energy levels. Whereas if you surround yourself with people who challenge you in a positive way, who encourage you, who show you what lies ahead in your future, then that energizes you. You feel so much different when you come out of those conversations. And so your friendship circles will naturally evolve over time as you grow. And for me, that is necessary, because you're moving to a complete different level. It's like me, my circles of friends have constantly grown. And I spend time with different people as I move through each phase of my life. And I think that's important because it also shows that you are embracing what I would call this white belt mentality. You are a beginner all the time. You always want to seek new information, new knowledge, and you want to learn from people ahead of you. You're not looking to settle. You don't want to settle.
The most successful people in the world are always learning.
Yeah.
They're consistently evolving and always growing, and they never stay stagnant.
Absolutely.
That's what I've realized about every single billionaire, millionaire friend of mine, or people that I know in the space, is that they're always just looking for the next best thing. They're always trying to find something to create a bigger impact, make a better change. And it's never like I'm happy in this position, and I think that separates the best from the rest.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful as well, because there's this idea of never enough.
Yeah.
If we fall into the trap of never enough, then we're never living. We're never living in this moment. And you always
But that is a
chasing
mistake,
something.
though, for a lot of people,
it's
right?
A mistake,
you bring
but
that up, but yes, it is.
But there's a fine balance here,
Right.
in the sense that, yes, it's okay to strive for more, but on the other side, you have to be grateful for the present.
Yeah, right.
Now, when you're grateful for the present, as in I'm grateful for the home I have, for the children I have, for the family I have, but yet I'm also striving for something more, then that's where you find this nice balance of flow. But whereas if you're only focused on the never enough, the chasing, and you're not really thinking about how far you've come or what you have right now, then what sort of life is that?
But how are people able to manage that, in a sense that, life can just keep going. Life flows, and people forget that they need to be grateful and mindful. Like, how do people take a step back and realize that every single day? What are your tips?
Well, the first thing is make space in your calendar for you. We are very quick at saying yes to that meeting invite in our calendar. We're quick to saying yes to that social event or that holiday that comes up in our calendar. But how quick are you at saying yes to me time?
Yeah.
Time for you to just be. We're always doing, we're always thinking busy is the answer to being more productive. But where's the time to just be? If you look at history, many of the greatest inventors have had their breakthroughs not from doing, but from being. Whether it's Isaac Newton with the apple falling on his head and gravity being discovered, or even J.K. Rowling on a train that was delayed, figuring out she wanted to write Harry Potter and seeing the visual of the entire story coming to her. We need space in our diary to just be, because in that silence we find the answers and the wisdom we're looking for.
Yeah, that's so true. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs, and their challenge is always, I never have time. It's not like you never have time. You don't make time.
Yes.
You can make time for the things to build a business. Then you can make time to take care of your health.
Absolutely true. I mean, I always say to people when you tell me you don't have time, what you are actually saying is that this is not a priority for me now. If it was a priority for you, you would make time. In the same way, I've got friends that have told me, Simon, I don't have time to work on my health, or I don't have time to chase my dreams. And then somebody mentions a Netflix series, and the next time we catch up, they've just consumed all of the seasons. And I'm wondering, how did you have time to watch all of the show? I mean, I don't even have time to watch one episode, let alone 2 seasons. But yet you've binged 2 seasons of that Netflix show. And so what it tells me, we always have time. It's a question of priority management. are you managing your priorities well enough? And if you think about it, 1 hour focus on your health and well-being each day is less than 5% of your day.
Right.
If you're saying you can't afford less than 5% of your day to focus on your health and well-being, then guess what? In the future, you have to find peace with dealing with illness. Your choice.
You know what I
You
love
have to
about your
decide.
book is that the first chapter is about health.
Indeed.
And you got it right, because most people don't focus on that as the first chapter in their life. People focus on that as the last chapter when they get sick.
Yeah.
Right? And so someone like you who has moved away from the corporate world and is now in the entrepreneurship world, we all face a different set of challenges, different set of stress, different type of burnout when we're traveling all the time and doing speaking engagements, signing book deals, signing books, meeting people. You know, there's always something happening in our lives. And I feel like we work even harder than a lot of people in stable jobs, right? Because
Yeah.
of like we need to bring the income in. So what are your strategies on how you manage stress and, you know, tips for people who are entrepreneurs that can take home, like do it today and implement it right away?
The first thing is do not neglect your health. As you said, there's a reason why I started my book with the chapter Invest in Your Health. Because when you are healthy, you have lots of hopes, dreams, and goals. When you are sick, you have only one. You know, I often think about if I could go back in time and talk to my 20-year-old self, what would I say? One of the first things I would say is do not abuse your body. Do not abuse your body because you only have one of it. And you will pay the price for it later if you abuse your body. And we easily abuse it through lack of sleep, poor nutrition, and lack of movement. So I would say make your health a priority. Make it the first thing you do each day. So at least when you do tackle whatever the day throws your way, you're in a far better state of mind. So for me, make health a priority. And then it's to understand that rest should not be seen as a reward for hard work. Otherwise, you're going to go through this experience of pushing into burnout and then resting, pushing into burnout and then resting. And that is not healthy and not sustainable for the long term. You have to integrate rest into your routine and rhythm. Make it part of how you attack each day. And so this is why I often say to people, make sure that when you have your lunch hour, make sure when you are taking a break from work, you are actually doing so with intention. Now, when you take a break from work and you're having a lunch and you're still scrolling your phone or looking at your screens, that doesn't count because then you're not actually resting.
When is the time that you actually turn on your phone in the morning?
So for me, it's once we've dropped off our daughter at school.
Nice.
Then I've got a clear frame of mind to then pick up what's going on in the world and my emails and so on. But in the beginning, it's breakfast with the family, time with my daughter, make sure she's prepared to go to school. We drop her off at school, and then my day starts.
So for you, it's really like you really make time for your family.
I
So
do.
I
And
know many entrepreneurs, and I'm sure you do too, who do not do that.
I have seen the effect of it, and I want to continue doing so because our daughter was born in 2020, which was when the pandemic first started. So we couldn't go outside. Of course, nobody could come into our homes. And so our daughter was very lucky in the sense that for the first 2 years, she had mum and dad home every single day.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And so we have seen this experience of this closeness we've built with her develop as she's grown older. You know, she has this comfortable relationship with us. She tells us what goes on at school. She can share her feelings and emotions. We understand her to, I think, a level that we may not have understood her if we weren't around her in the way we were in those first 2 years.
Yeah, so you believe family and time with family is mega important, but I don't believe it just from that sense. I believe it's super important for health too.
Yeah.
You know, for mental health and the stability that we get from our family dynamics, just like we get from community. It's super important to be able to manage stress better.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just always on the go, you know, trying to support the family and the responsibilities with that they take that for granted. And what is your relationship like with your daughter? Like, what is, as from a father, how do you explain managing energy to her?
Well, for me, I probably don't explain it to her because
You
she's
show her.
she's
Yeah,
still quite young.
Yeah, she's.
But I show her.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
what you find actually with children, and anybody who has children will know this, is that energy is a language that has no words,
Right.
but people can feel it.
Right.
So when our daughter meet someone who, I don't know, maybe lacks some emotional intelligence, she can feel it. And so she might not want to spend as much time with him or her. Whereas when she connects with someone who's very warm, who has a great energy about them, then she naturally wants to play more with that person. So children are very sensitive to energy. So how I've tried to show her through my actions is the way I respond to her, the way I communicate with her. So when she has, I don't know, we call it an emotional breakdown, she might cry, she might yell, or she might complain about something. I won't take it on face value. I won't kind of just yell at her. I might just say, do you need a hug or do you want to be heard?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Just give her those options, because sometimes children cry or get emotional because they may not feel heard by the adults in the room. And for them, it's a lot harder to get their voice heard. So maybe they just want to be heard, or maybe they just need some closeness. They need a hug, and sometimes that's all she needs. And so I'm trying to develop that resilience in her, and to show that it's comfortable and safe to share what you're going through with your parents. And I also want to show her things that I do is normal and things not to fear. You know, I took her to see me speak on stage for the first time last year, and she loved it. She felt inspired. I mean, now she's doing impressions of me on stage, and, I got her to speak to the audience. And so she sees speaking in front of public as something that is normal. And that's made her very expressive. That's made her want to put her hand up now to talk in front of the class, which is very different to who I was. But when I was a child, that was the last thing on my mind, to put my hand up to speak in front of a room of people. But she has that confidence and courage now. And for me, it's the most beautiful experience as a parent, to see how your child grows. And I think we've got a great relationship so far.
I think that's the one thing that I regret I didn't do with my son at an early years, is get him to public speak, to do some training in public speaking, because you really develop so much confidence when you know how to be around any person ever. And this is a good example in, like, when there are just people that walk into the room, it's automatic, you feel their energy. And then there are people that walk in the room that just either want to be on the side of the bar, or they don't want to be seen. And the people who walk into the room with that magnetizing energy and confidence are always the people that get the best opportunities.
Absolutely.
I was in a podcast episode with my friend Shiraz, and he mentioned this about Jeff Bezos' fiance, and how, just the energy that you have in the room, you can get whatever you want.
Absolutely.
But not everyone has that in them. It's not innate, right? You can build it over time, but how can someone who is super shy want to be where you and I are at today? They want to be able to enter the room and have zero social anxiety.
I would probably argue against that and say it is innate.
It's innate.
Because we are energetic beings living a human experience.
I like that.
When we are born, we are just pure energy.
We're pure energy.
You look at children, they have no fears, there's no doubts, they're just curious creatures. They're constantly learning. Now, the reason I would argue against that is because I know people that would say, I don't really feel comfortable talking about what I do and what I can give value to someone's life. Now, when I ask them, okay, let me rephrase the question. I'm thinking of going to the cinema next week. What film do you think I should watch based on what you've seen recently? And then you see them light up. Oh, we saw this really good film recently. You've got to check it out. I think you're going to love it. I know it's a bit long of a film, but it's one of the best films I've seen in recent years. They light up. Now, what that tells me is that when it comes to communication, and I know this because I had to do it myself as well, I've gone through this whole experience, is that the reason I was shy and introverted before, and I didn't want to speak to people, is because I wasn't really passionate about what I was studying. I wasn't really fulfilled in a career in finance. But when I found the things that lit me up, that just gave me joy and happiness, I could talk about it for hours. We could be in a conversation for hours about the things I read about and I learn about. So I think part of it is to find out within yourself what lights you up, what brings you joy, what excites you, and talk about those things first, because those things come most natural to you. You don't have to read a script. You don't have to learn words. You just talk from the heart. And I think that's how we receive energy. Maya Angelou said it best when she said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they never forget the way you made them feel. And that feeling is an emotional connection. And so when you can transfer energy through emotion, that is powerful. And as you say, you begin to attract opportunities into your life that maybe in most cases are beyond your wildest imagination.
And for someone that's got social anxiety and just really wants to break out of that and walk into a room, it's a room of all these change makers, and you got invited to it because they find potential in you, but you don't see that potential in yourself. How do you break outside of that?
Practice, and take small steps. You know, it's interesting. I had a conversation with a friend recently who said, Simon, I want to speak on a big stage just like you do. But I have this anxiety. I don't feel comfortable. I get really nervous. So I said to him, don't focus on speaking on a big stage yet, because you haven't built that experience. Your brain has no reference point. And so you're naturally going to get nervous. What you need to do is feed your brain with examples that you can do it. So what I suggested to him was to go and find an event where he could be on a panel. So now he's on a panel.
That's what I did, by the way, when I first started.
This is how we start.
Is that how you started too?
And you find an event where you can put yourself forward to be on a panel of, I don't know, of a few people, maybe 5 or 6 people. So now you're sharing the stage with other people, and the spotlight isn't just on you. And so you do have time to kind of listen to your fellow panelists, and then you can think about what you want to say. So you're beginning to train your brain in how to speak on the spot, but you're giving your brain some time to think. And then maybe the next stage is you do a fireside chat. Maybe you get interviewed by a host, and it's a bit more informal, but again, you have some time to get comfortable on stage. And then the next step is you speak to an audience on your own. But because you've built yourself into that situation, you've got confidence. You've taken the courage to take one tiny step. Your brain says, actually, that wasn't so bad. Why don't we try the next step?
Right.
And that's what builds your confidence. And as you become more confident, you become more bolder in the actions you take. So I would say chunk down that experience into the smallest thing that you can do
initially,
that won't feel like you're in the deep end, but it stretches you enough.
Yeah.
Because if you jump too quickly to the deep end, you retreat back to your comfort zone.
Right.
You say, I'm never going to do that again. That was scary. But if you just stretch yourself a little, it's like, okay, here's a nice challenge. It's not too scary, but it's just enough to challenge me. Do that enough times, and then you'll be a lot more comfortable.
If you could design an education system based on human potential and optimizing energy, what would that education system look like? I asked this question because, I honestly feel our education system is a little outdated.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of subjects in the system that have nothing to do with human life skills. They never teach you about nutrition.
Yeah.
They don't teach you how to get a job after university. There isn't anything to really help you become the best. They just teach you basic knowledge, technical skills, but not life skills.
Yes.
So how would you do things differently?
Great question. I've lots of thoughts on this because the moment I went out of university to look for jobs, I knew the education system wasn't in a good place for where the world is. Because you go through school and you have to learn core subjects like English, math, and science. Now, those things are great to give you a foundation, but they're never really going to get you far in life. Because once you're out of college, the world automatically assumes you know how to interview for a job, you know how to present, you know how to sell yourself. But how can people do that if they were never taught? And so when I started to fill in a CV, fill in an application for jobs, I realized I had no clue how to do all of this. And as I've been on this entrepreneurship journey, as I've written about energy and talked a lot about it, I've realized that if we had an education system focused on the 4 dimensions of energy, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, the world will be in a much better place. And I think this is going to happen at some point. Because if you look at the way that artificial intelligence is moving, we're getting to a point where students are now using AI to do their homework. So teachers will find it more difficult to tell, did the student actually do the work,
right,
or was it AI? And then it's going to force them into an existential crisis.
Right.
Do we have to change what we're teaching our children now? Because if we're only teaching them the same subjects and getting them to memorize things, well, AI can do that. But if we teach them how to look after their body, Well, AI can't do that. You have to do it yourself. You have to look after your own body. If we can teach them how to be more mentally resilient, if we can teach them to be more self-aware, if we can teach them to understand what they're naturally good at and how to develop those skills, i.e. spiritual energy about meaning and purpose, then guess what? They're going to be more invested in their own careers. Now, if we can teach them that, they're going to have a powerful foundation for when they become adults.
You know, we live in a world that is extremely connected, but we're very disconnected.
Absolutely.
And I spoke about this last year when I was at the Mind Valley University, and I did this talk on how we're more lonelier than ever.
Yeah.
Because although, sure, there's these advancements in technology and we're always on the go and always online, people don't want human connection anymore. It's not the same, right?
They don't want it, but we need it.
They don't want it, but we need it. And I think because of that, it's developing so much depression,
Yes.
mental health issues, suicide, just the fact that we're just lonely. And for someone that is coaching so many different types of people in different spaces, what do you recommend? What is your words of wisdom to people who feel so lonely when they need connection?
Well, prioritize human connection. I think first step I would always take, looking back at my own experiences of being lonely, is to journal, to get your thoughts onto paper.
Do you do this?
I do this, and
You
I think it's
practice
a
this
great
daily?
first step. I aim for daily. Reality is more a few times a week.
Right. And what do you write in the journal usually?
So it's a mixture of a brain dump and prompts. So I have a few prompts that are my go-to prompts, and then around that I just brain dump. Especially if there's a lot on my head, I just brain dump whatever I'm thinking about. And I think that activity is very healthy, because a lot of us, we carry heavy thoughts in our head, and unless we download them onto paper, it can become overwhelming. It can influence our mental health for a particular day. So I would say journaling is the first step, and the second is get around people more and be around people who are comfortable sharing and listening. That's key. You don't want to just be around people who unload onto you. You want to also be in a community or have people around you where you can share what's going on in your head as well. And when that happens, you will feel a lot lighter. And you will also realize, which I've come to realize, is that you never get to the top alone. We never do.
So we have community, we have journaling, we have taking care of your health,
Yeah.
we have mindfulness, we have better sleep. Are those the tools to master your energy?
I think they are fundamental tools to begin with. Like I said, when we put it into dimensions of physical is about sleep, nutrition, and movement. Mental energy is about mindset, creativity, and focus. Emotional energy is all about relationships. Relationship with yourself first, and the relationship you have with people around you. And then spiritual energy is about meaning and purpose. Are you doing the things that you are meant to do? Are you doing something that brings you joy and fulfillment? Because when you do, you will unlock the greatest source of energy that there is going. You will find strength inside of you never realized you had.
Do you feel that the world is moving in the right direction or in the wrong direction?
Right now, honestly, I think we're not in a great place. There is lots of division in the world, and we are not open to hearing opinions different from our own.
Right.
And that is a challenge in the world we're in now. And we forget we're all one. We are all part of the same race, and that we should seek to understand rather than to quickly judge and to dismiss. And unfortunately, that seems to be the world we're currently in at the moment.
If there's one person that is not in the world anymore that you want to say something to, who would it be and what would you say?
The first thought that came to my head was my mum, purely because it's, she's someone, as I said, that was the emotional glue of the family. And she comes to my mind because I wish she could have seen my journey. I wish she could have seen me go to college, to marry, to have the daughter we have now. And I would probably say, just thank you. Thank you for what you've given me when I was young. I don't think you would have seen the impact it's had when I'm older. But it's passing down to our daughter. And I wish she could have met you. That's what I would say.
What is in store for you in the next 5 years? What's your mission? What's your goals?
Well, my mission is simple. I have a mission for myself and a outward mission. The mission for myself is simply to be better than who I was yesterday.
Right.
If I succeed in that, then I'm growing, I'm evolving, and that's what brings me happiness. From an outward point of view, it's to awaken as many people's lives as I can so that they can write a better story for themselves and pursue something of meaning. Because when they do, they're going to experience an uplift of energy like never before.
It's so incredible to sit with someone and listen to a story that is so close to mine, and to be able to understand just from a different background and
Yeah,
upbringing, that we all in so many ways we're so intertwined.
absolutely.
We're all experiencing so many similar emotions. However, some people are able to come out of that successful while others can't.
Yeah,
But it gives people the hope that because we're all connected, that if they can have it, you can too. It's just a matter of choice. And I always say this to people, and I know that you'd believe this too, is that we're only one step away to a better life, one decision away.
yeah,
One decision away to the life that you want to live. Forget about being a victim to your circumstance. Forget about, I don't have it right now. You can have it.
yeah.
And I believe that your book has impacted so many people, but also by me reading it, it touched so many emotions in me that, it's just nice to feel that there are people out in the world who experience the exact same things and have come out on the other side so much better. I believe that our listeners will love this episode because you showed me the human side of you,
Yeah.
and also a side of you that have inspired a lot of people to create massive changes in their lives. Thank you so much for your time today, Simon. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to hopefully another episode with you.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me on.